All right, here we are again for webinar 3. Um, this is going to be the primary practice that I would like you to explore before you come to Sitter School. So why I'm sending this out now instead of just a week before. This is a continuation of our second talk on the body scan practice. So this is taking it to the next level and going into more detail, and then also next step in the practice called tracking. Um, so I've taught this a lot of different ways in the past, and I've always tried to do the body scan first, give people a couple of weeks, and then introduce these concepts. But what I'm finding maybe is that as psychedelic medicine people, we like to get the whole picture from the beginning, but know that this is a lot of detail, and you don't have to think too hard about these concepts as you're doing them, so I think I'm introducing this now in this way just to give you language and also capacity that this is a real part of the process and a way to deepen your process. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so to get started, we're going to share a few concepts, and then we'll go into the 5 awareness practice and then tracking. So first concept is the light body, and this might sound a little new agey to some of you, and that's okay. I don't necessarily mean it in the same way that some people use it as, but think of in an alchemical context, I guess, using spiritual alchemy. There's a statement in alchemy, a saying, and it's prevalent in a lot of traditions, and you may have heard it before. And the statement is, "As above, so below. As without, so the soul." The idea that we are a fractal of all that is, a small hologram and a reflection of a larger image, a larger hologram that we are all a part of, and that everything outside of us can be found inside of us. Everything inside of us is expression of that which is outside of us. And the light body is also maybe a representation to describe our energetic body. In an ancient traditions like the 7 chakras is an example of the and meridians is an example of our energetic structure of our bodies. And there's also geometrical forms that are associated with this. And here's some of the images from Alex Gray of these energetic structures. And then here's another pretty image. So the way I'm using the term light body is that it is a somatic and oftentimes visual representation of our physical form with greater psychedelic awareness. What that means is that this is a real phenomenon, like something that is commonly experienced with people as a connection to this energetic body that is superimposed on our physical form. Any tensions that we have in our physical bodies interact with our light body, and vice versa, and it also impacts our mental health and like psychological health. So I would love to think that we're all illuminated beings with these perfect light bodies, but the reality is a little different, and that's because of another concept called dross, at least, and this is another alchemical term that I've incorporated into our practice because it's more neutral than an associated term that we use called trauma. It's more neutral, and it implies, it doesn't necessarily imply really big experiences. We can accumulate tension in our body over and over again, which can impact our ability to remain healthy and be healthy in the world. And I thought dross was a really great term, and this is how it's used in alchemy to describe an experience of purification. And so just a straight up dictionary definition of dross is unwanted material that is removed from a mineral such as gold to make it better, something of low value or quality, the scum that forms on the surface of molten metal, waste or foreign matter, something that is base, trivial, or inferior. In psychological terms, at least in this orientation, dross, quote, dross, metaphorically speaking, in the human body, psychologically speaking, is stuckness in all its forms. Its damage is the health of the overall system and caused by incomplete processes and difficult experiences. This is types of dross like that we're going to encounter, and all humans have this stuff. This is just a natural common experience for us, and one of the goals of Sitter School and working with psychedelics is to remove as much of this dross as we can and need to, so that we can be lighter emotionally and physically healthier, have more vitality, so we can live into who we are in the world, right? So here's some examples. So it's like an umbrella term, and then there's different kinds of dross in the system. So physical tension, pain, diseases, tightness or kinks in the fascia system. Something physical. Unwanted emotional or psychological patterns. Shame as a substance that covers us. Fear, anxiety, anger. Remember we talked about like a symptom being halfway out. So a symptom is a form of dross that is expressing so it can then be released. We can also have mental forms of dross, unwanted thoughts, compulsions, judgments, and belief systems, something that's sometimes referred to as old programming, like habits, things like that. There can be chemical dross in the body, pharmaceutical residues, and sometimes these can clear using psychedelics. People can actually taste the drugs that they've had before, re-experience them as it's leaving. We're getting more on the energetic levels here as blocks and the meridians or chakras. They can be symbolic or archetypal manifestations. Something that feels bigger than us, a block that is in our lives. Karma might be considered a form of dross, something we have to burn through, like they talk about burning karma, burn through to clear so that we can be free of our past experiences. Ancestral dross would be more associated with like family traumas, family experiences that, families that have parents who are veterans of war, that has an impact on our lives. It was something that impacted us. And then dross isn't necessarily just internal. That we want to think transpersonally, that we're part of a larger system. So in the concept of alchemy of as above, so below, that externally speaking, we can experience dross or blocks in our capacity to do things. Might be forms of oppression, isms, racism, sexism, discrimination, lack of education, lack of resources. Anything that blocks us from reaching our full potential can be defined as dross. And the good news is that it can be worked with and moved. Everything about alchemy, can be summed up in this idea of turning lead into gold. So it's not that we're getting rid of all of this necessarily, but we can transmute it and transform it into a higher expression of itself, the one that supports us in something that becomes a gift. So in this perspective, an accumulation of dross in the human system can show up as what we call, clinically speaking, as trauma. And again, we all have this stuff because we're all human, and it's just part of our human life experience. And some of us have more of it than others. And the goal of any sort of healing modality is to create containers where people can both heal their traumas, but also stop traumas from happening in the future, right? And so this is why we do this work, is to perpetuate a system that responds to trauma by transmuting it and then creating conditions so that it no longer has to happen. at least in, as much as possible, right? Like these are goals and intentions as opposed to like a utopian fantasy. This idea that we living into a world that is becomes less and less traumatized, right? And this is a goal of our program, is to create a container or multiple containers with other facilitators to do this work in other locations around the country, in the world, so that we can create these little engines of transformational experiences to heal trauma, to release dross, and then to step into who we truly are, right? So for those of you who don't have therapeutic backgrounds, just some of you, there's different kinds of trauma, and sometimes we underestimate the impact of these traumas can have on our bodies and our systems, because they don't just impact how we feel, but they impact our potential, who we can potentially be, right? So developmental trauma is something, think of, instead of it being like an acute one-time experience trauma, which is like say a car accident or an assault or something like that. It happened, it's there, and if it was a specific experience, that can cause pretty significant trauma. But developmental trauma can be just as devastating and even more so. And there doesn't have to necessarily be like one big experience that can cause developmental trauma. It can be like a sense of unsafety or shaming, ongoing situation that doesn't feel safe, and that can impact our nervous systems pretty significantly. Secondary trauma and vicarious trauma is something that we as therapists and healers want to pay attention to and gain skill sets and how to support our own health and well-being. And some stories can be so traumatic that even hearing the story of what happened can be difficult for the therapist, and that this type of trauma or dross can accumulate in the system and over time can cause burnout and other physical health problems, fatigue and such. So this again, why we do the body scan as therapists, is we want to stay clear and keep moving this stuff out of our systems. We all have it to some degree, and collectively it has huge cost to our society. We can't see, when people have severe traumas, they can't see themselves or the world clearly. Might be minimizing who they are, right, and their potential, but also feeling the world is much more unsafe than it really is, or a situation is unsafe when it might not be, right? We can't live into our potential when we're severely traumatized, and the same can be said about our societies, right? Like, and why we need to take this healing to like a societal level, because it's time to heal our society. And just as a secondary trauma, like dross trauma is can be like a contagion. It's like a meme contagion or a behavioral contagion that um, you know, that it perpetuates cycles of harm. Um, abuser was abused and passing these traumas through lineages of family or generations and that sort of thing. And in the grand scheme, it causes wars, it causes incredible misunderstandings, and it creates reactionary responses so that things can't be resolved and they get worse instead of better. So there's a real significant need and a reason to address trauma and dross in the system. So like this dross is like a substance in our bodies. It has different qualities associated with it. As I said, it could be a memory, it could be an emotion, it could be a physical pain or tension. It can feel different ways sensationally. It can feel like a chunk of rock in our system. It can feel sticky, gooey substance covering areas of our bodies. It can feel like a plate over our heart and back for protection, right? It can feel a lot of different ways. And part of clearing it is learning to understand it through discernment and awareness. I like to play with and deepening my body scan practice by exploring my body as a terrain. Like I imagine shrinking myself to little bitty and imagining moving through my body as a terrain and exploring it as an image or physical structure, a place that I can go and see and witness and do things with, right? Like breathe into, relax around, burn through, things like that. But I want to give some language to this deeper exploration capacity that we have. So this is the 5 awareness practice. Um, uh, Again, trying to categorize different ways of perceiving and sensing. And the more, again, we don't want to be attached to the language of it, but the language helps us understand it and discern what's going on. Just a reminder that discernment is way different than judgment. Judgment is naming something as good or bad, and discernment is more about identifying the qualities of it. It's like, oh, this is what it is, and I can put a judgment on that, but I want to be specific of what I'm actually feeling, right? And um, so thinking of like physical senses, there's other ways of perceiving that are important for us to consider. And when we can do all of these 5 in one moment, then we have a very rich inner experience. It doesn't necessarily be, we have to use words to describe it, but it becomes then more of a perception, right? So the 5 ways of perceiving and sensing are physical sensations, energetic sensations, noticing feelings and emotions, noticing thoughts, memories, and beliefs. And then the 5th one is like an inner visual capacity. It can show up as symbolic or imaginal. It has a quality that may show up as a symbol, right? So maybe a block visualizes a locked door, and breathing into it, a key shows up, right? Like these can be real experiences. And so in the body scan practice, you can take each of these 5 different ways of perceiving, 5 ways of being aware of your experience, and break it down. You can do a whole body scan on just physical sensations, just energetic, just emotions, just thoughts, right? And you can break it down and explore each one specifically. And the way you would do that is when I bring my awareness to blank, I notice blank, and you name it. So when I bring my awareness to my heart, I notice that I feel sad, right? That would be an emotional awareness of a location in your body. When I bring awareness to my heart, I notice that I'm thinking about this difficult time in my life, and I feel sad, right? So thoughts and memories start popping in, right? When I notice my awareness when I bring my awareness to my heart, I notice that it is hot. That would be an energetic sensation. I notice a physical constriction or tightness. That would be a physical sensation. Or I see a rose blooming, opening, right? That would be a visual, symbolic, imaginal experience. So it brings depth and understanding to our practice, right? And then again, when we're able to understand and discern, we can relax more into our process. We can understand what's going on, and we can do something with it, right? So that's the most important piece: is what do we do with this? What do I do with this sadness in my heart, right? So I can let it go, so I can move forward, right? Some people, their dross is like a full body cast on them, and they're breaking free of it, right? Sometimes it feels like sludge that's moving through your system and clearing, right? They can be really impactful experiences. So let's break some of these down a little bit. Physical sensations, body sensing, so the 5 senses, this feelings, touch, smelling, tasting, right? Proprioception, how relaxed are you? Qualities of pain are not uncommon. So what kind of pain is it? Like, don't just say, I feel pain. Well, how do you know it's pain, right? Is it hot? Is it sharp? Is it throbbing, stabbing, clenching, right? These are ways to describe actual experiences in the body. Um, and then balance and acceleration, that might even be more of an energetic thing too, but people can experience rising, uh, tightness, or being pressure, being pushed down, or spinning, in these spaces. Um, Energetic sensations overlap a lot with the physical sensations, but they're a little different, so you might feel tightness or opening in your belly as a physical sensation, but maybe your third chakra is opening and it feels like it's spinning, right? There's nothing physical in your belly that's literally spinning, so that's not a physical sensation. It's more of an energetic sensation. Is it hot? Is it cold? Are you shivering? Is it freezing? Some things feel like a frequency or vibration, a buzzing or a throbbing, like a buzz, buzz, or a whoa, 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 throbbing through the body, like a heartbeat. But it's not your heart. It's something else. It's throbbing, right? Might feel currents of energy. You might feel contractions, expansions, things like that. Um, so that would be energetic sensing. Feelings and emotions are pretty self-explanatory, but there's a lot of words that describe emotions. Sad is a little different than morose, a little different than grieving, is a little different than um, uh, you know other shades of sadness, right? There's 100 words for love, and they all mean different things. There's a huge difference between anger and rage, or anxiety and panic, right? Different qualities and levels. Then there's complex emotions. Like love is a complex emotion. Grief is a complex emotion that contains a lot of feelings and emotions. So grief could contain incredibly deep love, right? That's why we do grieve, is because we love and there's been a loss. But it can also be sadness. It can be anger and frustration for something having happened. It can be um, appreciation, deep appreciation for something, right? All at the same time. And then extreme emotions are appropriate to really consider in these states, specifically rage and terror. Rage is a neurological response that we can release and clear. Terror is very similar. Usually these are associated with strong nervous system activations, right? And so a nervous system activation would be like a trauma response that can, if you can stay with it and explore it, again, it's a symptom halfway out, right? And so getting to know these the language of emotions and being like, oh, this is how I feel. It's a little different than what I thought. This is how I really feel. How do you know you feel sadness, right? Like, might be connected to a physical sensation of like heaviness in the eyes, or even tears, right? Like, see how they interconnect. Like some people say, I feel sadness in my eyes, not in my heart, right? That's significant. That's saying something. So I'm going to send you a PDF of a feeling, we call it a feeling wheel. This is coming from, I think it's from nonviolent communication programs and stuff. And so naming feelings is a really important part of this. As a therapist or guide or sitter, sometimes reflecting how you see somebody's feeling can be really important information to them. They may not know how they're feeling, and that's important. It can be very significant in someone's healing process. Confusion, there's a good one. Like sometimes people say, I feel confused, or you might feel confused. So that's an indication that there's just a lot of feelings happening at the same time, some of which are conflicting. So like example would be like nervousness and excitement. You can attach to nervousness and get neurotic in it, or you can attach to the excitement. Like going to California, for example, would be an example of me feeling nervous and excited at the same time. So I can orient to the excited side. and still allow myself to feel it fully, but not get overwhelmed by the nervous, but some people that might be confusing. They might just think it's all nerves, right? Um, so the next piece is thoughts, memories, and beliefs. And these are mental constructs. These are memories. These are ideas like memes, belief systems, judgments, um, assumptions, right? These are really impactful in our lives, right? How we think about things. And sometimes it can show up as like a loop. You're just playing this loop, right? And particularly Americans, but people in general, we attach our identities with our thoughts. I am what I'm thinking. And the reality is it's really not our thoughts. They're helpful and useful at times, but they can also really get in the way of understanding something. So particularly a belief, like feelings of inadequacy or self-judgment, they may just not be true. It's just like fundamentally people are way harder on themselves than what's generally true. And so these practices around noticing your thoughts in the body and breathing with them allows them to kind of like cycle through, and then eventually they lose their energy and start to break down. And then we start to see underneath them why we might have these assumptions and thoughts, and then question, challenge the validity of them, and move forward in a lighter way. It's like there might be somatic experiences as you release these thoughts, right? And this was what, again, a symptom looks like leaving your body. Memories are another really big part of these processes. Both positive and negative. They can be resources, but they can also be difficult experiences. Um, and what happens with trauma and dross when we, to do a real long story short, what happens is they get like a difficult memory gets incompletely processed in the brain. And it gets stored in a way that causes energetic tension in the brain, literally. And so when we remember them in a safe container and reevaluate them, explore them, it allows that process in the brain to complete. And just that itself is healing. And this is part of MDMA assisted psychotherapy, and is a major part of cannabis assisted work as well. The visual, auditory, symbolic, imaginal, sometimes in the auditory, the music will show up in a specific way for one person and a completely different way in the other person. Why is that? Why does one person attach to a particular sound in the music and another person a different sound? Like there's information in that. Why does this particular symbol show up versus that one, right? What are the qualities of that symbol? So this is a part that gets kind of superimposed on all the other aspects, specifically with hallucinogenic psychedelics, right? Like where you're able to perceive things that aren't necessarily there in a physical sense. And they may be, like visual hallucinations where their eyes open, but more often than not, we're talking about internal visions, internal images, active imagination, right? So, they can show up like in the light body, like the visual proprioception. You can see your heart center, right? And it will look like a structure. There might be a net around it, right? And that's the tightness of the dross. And so turning towards and releasing any tensions in the image of the net impacts how we feel physically and in our body. And then we might experience an energetic discharge, right? As a piece of that netting, the symbol of the netting starts to break free of the tightness in the heart, right? It can also show up. We haven't talked really about this yet. I think it's going to be the next topic, but we're playing with like substances here, right? Things, right? But they can also show up as like dynamic images, dynamic presences, totem animal type images, archetypes, deities, ancestors, right? So it can show up more than just a substance or dross. These can show up as what we would call aspects of self, right? Or things that feel foreign, like a spirit, right? Or a shadow element or something like that, something that seems kind of scary. And in our memories, we can relive them, we can see them in this space. It's not just like, I remember this happening. It's like, no, I'm actually like, I have a field of view and I can see what's going on. And I can explore that field of view like I would explore my body scan. I would amplify it. What else do I see? What else is there? What do I not notice? Maybe I can look a little deeper into that, right? So with all of these practices, we go back to, again, the simple mantra: bring awareness to my body, use my breath to surrender. So what do you notice? And it could be in any of these categories. It can be in any statement, right? It can be in any of the 5 and then a subcategory, a sub descriptor of each, right? It could be all of them in a specific spot in your body, that sort of thing. And you take a breath with it and relax all around it, right? So you keep a focused intent, focused mind, but your body is super relaxed and still. And you do it again and again. So what happens, particularly on psychedelics, is that these sensations, sensings, ways of perceiving begin to merge into one way of perceiving, right? So synesthesia would be an example of like seeing sound, seeing music as ripples of light or something like that. And people have these things, and it's not uncommon with psychedelics, but there's other ways. There's another term that I've discovered in researching synesthesia called ideasthesia, which is an activation of a concept that evokes a particular perception like experience. So a particular emotion can show up as a color. Not just any music, but the note of C can show up as a specific color. Concepts can show up as numbers, right? Like there's all kinds of weird things that the brain does, but generally the primary synesthesia in our therapeutic work is like the activation of a somatic sensation, so a somatic awareness sense coupled with an activated inner process. So what do I feel in my body as I allow myself to experience this emotion, this memory, this thought, that sort of thing. The coupling of the somatic part of the experience with these other ways of perceiving appears to be significantly associated with healing our bodies, healing our psyches, and letting go of these things that we may have like cognitively known about, but just couldn't do anything about, right? So this is where the true healing comes from, is in the body. And so I came up with this term called psychedelic synesthesia, which is the symphony of the, like I think of it as the symphony of a psychedelic experience. These 5 ways of perceiving can get hyper amplified on medicines, hyper amplified in a lot of different ways. It can be quite unusual, but what if you could experience them all simultaneously? It would be like listening to a symphony, and listening to the flute, listening to the bass, listening to the drums, like it adds a richness to the experience, right? And so that's our goal, is to be able to spontaneously and automatically be able to experience the psychedelic state in the fullness of the psychedelic state, and to not be overwhelmed by it, right? So the more we can be with, breathe in, allow, witness, the more we can stay in contact with our inner healing and transformational experience. And the goal as a sitter guide is to be able to have even a further dual relationship or dual awareness of this phenomenon, this awareness, not just in yourself, but in witnessing your client as well, simultaneously. These are all things that we can grow into and develop further as sitters and guides. So just sitting there is with a client is a hyper and very active, imaginal, spiritual, energetic, sensational, meaning feel a lot in your bodies. You have a lot of memories yourself, right? While simultaneously being in contact with somebody else's process. It's really meaningful. It's very deep. And it can deeply impact somebody's sense of wellness. And so this is just a reminder that dross is something that can be perceived in all the 5 ways of perceiving, 5 awareness practice. So we have physical sensations that are dross-like tension, pain in the body, energetic sensations, the shaking off of the dross, right? Feelings and emotions. Sadness is a real common state of a dross, or anxiety, right? Depression. Think of depression as just a heavy, thick, it makes you more, it makes you immobile, right? But what if you could break free from that? What if you didn't have to think your way out of it? What if you could physically break free, right? But through breathing practices, through breath work, that sort of thing. Dross as again, as a memory, or as a habit, right? As a judgment that just pops up like a program every time. What if you could clear that? Wouldn't you want to clear that? These are the gifts that we're offering our clients, and to navigate these spaces with them, we've got to learn to do it ourselves, right? And so again, the holotropic principle is movement towards wholeness. Whatever it looks like, that is what healing and waking up looks like. I know it sounds unusual. Of course, there's exceptions to say like a crisis situation, but these, crisis situations don't happen necessarily in contained psychedelic therapeutic places. But they can look very unusual, right? And so, and big, right? They can be big experiences for people. So far we've talked about this idea of the body scan meditation, where you focus on a particular location in the body and relax all around it. Then you go to the next part of your body and relax around it. Then that next part, and so you can go up the body, down the body, around, whatever works for you, right? It's very structured. This, then this, then this, and a lot can come out of those experiences. Tracking, on the other hand, is more of an open, intuitive practice. It's like the next stage. So once you do the body scan, now what, right? And so it's very simple. Let's see, how do I want to do this? Going back to the mantra, bring awareness to my body, use my breath to surrender. Simply asking the question, what do I most notice in my body in this moment, in this present moment, right? We're working the present moment experience. So you sit with it. Well, I notice a tension in my shoulders or something like that. So you turn your awareness to that location and relax all around it. You take a breath with it. You do the like these 5 capacities. Let's see if we can move through them. You bring your focus awareness to it. You take a breath with it. You remain curious with it and say things like, what else is here? What is this? Be curious, be playful, be creative. If this were color, what would it be? And you relax physically all around it. Physically, like you literally work to relax the muscles in your body, but you can imagine, you can relax into your imagination, imagine it dissolving if it's a tension in your shoulders. Then you discern, well, what is here? What is going on here? What is the name of the sensation that I'm experiencing? Is it hot? Is it tight? Is there a memory associated with this? That sort of thing, right? And so that was one moment, right? it lasts like a split second or longer, right? It could be states that last longer, but it might be very dynamic. And so you say the mantra again: bring awareness to my body, use my breath to surrender. Well, I don't really notice the tension in my shoulders as much, but I do notice vibration running down my arms, right? And so that's what I focus on, and that's what I relax around. And it feels like that's tension that's releasing out of my shoulders and flowing down my arms. Might have an image or a color associated with it, right? Um, so and so this is what you do: is we facilitate what we are experiencing, this somatic release or the symptom. We facilitate that process by turning our attention to it and relaxing with it and breathing with it. So we keep that gentle circular breathing going, and that helps move the tension through and out of us, right? um, we can also, so that's one process. So it supports the holotropic principle. It's like a way we engage the holotropic principle and support it, right? Facilitate it, right? And that's what we do as facilitators. The term facilitate means to make easier, right? So we're facilitating a process that's already natural, but we can amplify it. We can match it, and that process increases its effectiveness, right? I haven't talked about this, but tracking can also be tracking towards an intention. So you can try this on, like, so body scan intention is to relax, right? Maybe open tracking intention would be to release tension out of the body that's pretty ingrained. But say you envision wanting to do something that really matters to you in your life, right? Like going back to school or something that seems difficult. One thing you can do is you can visualize what it's like to go through that, right? And you might feel real positive aspects of, oh, it would be wonderful. Or you might feel dross. You might feel a belief system that stops you from stepping into that capacity. Say going back to school, oh, it's too expensive, or I'm not smart enough, or some limiting belief, right? So that gets evoked, and you use the 5 awareness practice to say, oh, here's a thought, here's a habit. What do I notice in my body? I might feel tightness in my belly because of like anxiety or worry, right? And so I turn towards my belly and breathe into it, relax all around it, and then all of a sudden it'll start to release in some way. It might show up as a energetic discharge, or you might feel that worry even more, and it'll start to amplify and loop. Or you might start having memories of all the times you've messed up in life and had to start over, or whatever that is for you, right? Like we all have these experiences um, that we've had to overcome, right, and move on from. What if we could move through it instead? What if we really could release it, right? And so, and then maybe under that, like as we release the worry of going back to school, for example, we might see that, we might rediscover that deep desire of learning, right, or understanding, or just that desire to be curious and to understand something, right? Like so we start to pull these little gems of ourselves out of these pockets of dross, right? So that's a really fascinating way, and you have to have focused awareness to stay with something long enough to engage it. And you have to have emotional tolerance to stay with the big emotion of worry long enough for it to clear, right? These are capacities that we can develop, right? I like to, so when I do my tracking exercises and I stumble upon like a chunk of dross, there's 2 things I do with it. And this is like initial stage stuff, but otherwise we're getting into like higher level alchemy things. But the first 2 stages of alchemy are associated with fire and water. Focus, intention, right? Pressure, intensity, and water, which is associated with release, surrender, dissolving, letting go. It's very fluid, right? Relaxing. So if you feel an area of tension in your body, you can put your focus on it like a magnifying glass, right? Just zoom into it. And that brings energy naturally to it, and it might start to sizzle or dissolve, or like break through, or burn, and turn to ash. We can breathe into these spots, intensify, go to the deepest spots, and help clear them, right? We always want to step back from something like that when we do that. So you imagine you step back from it, it creates space around it, and you can let the energy of the water element flow into it and remove the ash, dissolve the edges of it, and relax all around it, right? And so this is a primary orientation of medicinal mindfulness, and a lot of spiritual practices of turning towards, moving, using fire to burn through, focused intention, and then relaxing all around it, moving into it, going into it, working it a little bit, and relaxing all around it. And it's amazing practice. And I do a lot of this work with my clients to help clear severe tension, often caused by some sort of emotional or physical experience that caused trauma, and that this is what the clearing of that really can look like. And again, underneath these things, one of the wonderful gifts of this work is that it never ends on a difficult point, it never ends on a hard place, it never ends on a shitty realization, like I'm a bad person. It's never like that. We're innately good, as human beings. And so it always ends, like a process always ends on a gift, or like a retrieval of a part of ourselves that is longing to be let out, and Carl Jung called these gold in the dark. And in my experience and working with people, it doesn't necessarily look like gold. It looks like little gems of soul stuff that people are retrieving and bringing back into their being and their humanness, right? So tracking is the movement of consciousness towards healing and awakening. You're just following along, and you trust the holotropic principle that it's movement towards wholeness, no matter what it looks like, even if it's the scariest thing you've ever experienced. Stay with it, be gentle, take breaks from it, so, like zoom out if it gets too intense, zoom back in when you're ready, and keep going, and know that this is an ongoing process, that it doesn't have to always be complete in one session for it to be really helpful. All right. So again, this is what tracking is in this moment, I notice this in my body, and I'm going to take a breath with it, and I'm going to look at it and then explore it. What else is there? And I'm going to take a breath with that. And then in the next moment, it might have shifted a little bit. So I'm going to bring my awareness to that and look at it, focus. I might feel a discharge. I might feel, say, a tightness in my shoulders, but a discharge. All of a sudden I feel it move out my arm. And then it goes back to my shoulder, and that's what I feel. And then it'll discharge and move out my arm. I just keep following that experience until it finally subsides. Then I say, what else is there? What's under that? I remain curious and playful, right? It's I don't know, it seems like super theoretical in this context, because I'm giving you these ideas to try on, but these are very visceral, very hyper dimensional, very real experiences, especially when you take a psychedelic, right? This isn't just meditating. This is something that truly amplifies a profound process in the body, and it's very obvious when it's happening. If it feels not obvious, it feels really stuck, just imagine it's just a real chunky stuck piece of dross, and you just keep working it, and it will clear. I've seen spontaneous healings happen from these experiences, where people literally shake out rheumatoid arthritis, and can move their bodies again after this. So imagine, like, rheumatoid arthritis is just like accumulation of dross in our joints, and it makes them inflamed, and that these practices help release that inflammation, right, and tension, and so we feel better from it. I don't know if you can read all at the top. It says tracking is foundation for trauma healing, dross clearing, and greater psychedelic experiences. So we're talking like body experiences, right? Tracking into the body, but this tracking can also step into the imaginal realms the collective unconscious, the universal psyche. So you're no longer just tracking the experience in your body, but all of a sudden it becomes an imaginal landscape, and you're on a grand adventure, and you can track into memories that feel like they're from past lives. You can track into mind states that we would associate with unity consciousness, bliss experiences. This all exists inside of us, but in these states, it becomes something bigger. It becomes something like a reflection of a bigger process that feels very real, right? So in the document that I'm sending you with these webinars, these 2 webinars, there's some brief discussion on different things you can do as you track, and so again, it's more like these are just ideas that I came up with just from my own experiences, and I'm sure there's a lot more things that you can do. So like imagine you do a whole body scan just on your heart, and instead of going all around it, you just keep going deeper and deeper into it. An interesting thing that our psyches, our awareness can split, and we can focus on different parts of our bodies at the same time. Like I said, like with the proprioception, bring awareness to your left pointer finger and your right pinky toe, right? When we bring awareness to do parts of our body simultaneously, an energetic line is created between the two, and that can facilitate healing. Right. So here's something you can do. Say your belly is really gnarly. It's really worried, but your heart is open and clear, and like there's a bliss experience happening in your heart. Right. So you can bring awareness to your heart. And you can bring awareness to your belly, and imagine all that love and support and bliss, connection, resource from your heart is just moving and flowing into your belly, bringing new resource, and see what happens. Like I can pretty much guarantee something is going to shift. We talked about burning through a blockage and dissolving and flushing. So like sometimes our meridian centers get stuck, and these can cause physical diseases and things, right? So we want to clear that. We want to clear like blocks to our creativity, to our self-expression. Some people feel tightness in their throat, and it's not just physical tightness, it's all the words they've had to swallow, right? So what would it be like to put your focus awareness on that spot in your throat that's blocking you from speaking your truth? What would that do, right? So you put the fire on it, focus awareness, and burn through it as much as you can. And then you breathe, let it dissolve and clear. Put that dissolved material into the earth, whatever metaphor you wish to use, put it in a safe location, and then go further. What else is there? I mean, it's like there could be layers of tension, there could be layers of emotions, fear, right? There could be layers of memories, there could be layers of thoughts and judgments, things that people have told you in your past that just moving out of it and clearing, right? And over time, these are things that can help us feel better. Another thing I like to do, the next one is filling a void space, but you have to know where these void spaces are. Like I like to ask the question, what do I not notice in my body? Sometimes we have experiences that, it's like our bodies are like, yeah, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know what to do with this sensation. It might be like a chronic pain. So it just covers it up and numbs it over. And we just don't have any sort of sensation associated with it anymore. Again, that's why a symptom is a good thing, right? Because the real gnarly stuff we don't even know is there, right? So when we start to wake up to a location, it's an opportunity to heal it, right? So sometimes it can feel like a void space. It can feel like nothing's there, but that might be like a cloaking device or something, or a cloak of invisibility, right? It's just a layer that feels like nothing's there. So playing with what do you not notice in your body, resting in those spaces. And then last and not least, but external tracking, like you have an idea, you have an intention. What would it be like to start taking steps into that intention, into the real world? And you're going to hit obstacles. You're going to hit things you didn't realize. You have to go around it or figure out a way to work it and transmute it. And so, the metaphor of the alchemical metaphor of as above, so below, this is what integration is. We have these inner experiences, and now we have to do something with it. You know, that would be a good example. Clear the dross of speaking my truth. Well, now I got to go out there and speak it, right? Because I want to, and like I can't not speak my truth anymore. So, and then what that's going to do is it's going to have consequences in our lives, you know. So can you learn to speak compassionately? Can you learn to speak in ways that support others, right? Like doesn't scare others. But at some point you might have to say, you know, no, you know, this is my truth and this person doesn't support my truth. So I have to change my life in some meaningful way, right? And so it's like world transforming when we do this work. It's literally world transforming, not just in our lives, but it ripples through family systems, and at least gives other people the opportunity to turn towards their own healing and awakening process. It gives them opportunity to step into these experiences with you, or it's a gentle bowing and say, you know, this situation, whether it's work or relationship or whatever it is, just no longer serves me, and I'm choosing to go a different path now, right? That's what tracking is. I think this might be close. So I give you a couple of tracking exercises to play with, and so you know, you can't take psychedelics every day. So sometimes tracking is going to be like a subtle experience when you're doing it with just a mindfulness. It'll you know, these physical sensations will amplify with your breath if you, you know, intensify your breathing, you know, and that's why breath work is the bottom one here. It's these practices get really extremely evoked in breath work, and we're going to get a chance to do breath work in our time together. But one thing you can play with is go outside on a cold day, without a coat for a little while, not too long, and let yourself shiver. And notice, you know, just get to notice the what shivering feels like. You tracking the experience, right? So it's a real physical sensation. You can actually relax around it, and you can move the shivering around your body. It's a very interesting experience, right? So that's an example. The other example is a little harder to do, but it's a good example of a contraction or an intensification of a symptom and then a release. So if you, like, say you curl your toes up, I don't know if, like, sometimes I can get my toes curled up, and I can create like a spasm, right, where all of a sudden it starts to cramp. My toe will cramp. For some reason I can't do it, but you can create these situations where you can create a cramp in your body. What would it be like to, instead of try to like adjust your toes, stretch them out, what would it be like to really just let it cramp? And it can be incredibly painful, but it's not going to hurt you. And it can be a real intense experience, right? So this is kind of like a metaphor of other psychedelic intense experiences, right? And so what does it feel like to relax around extreme pain, whether it's emotional pain or a physical tension, like a simple cramp in your body, right? And what will happen is, like, say your toes are cramped up like this. If you can let it, what will happen is it'll start to release on its own, and it might cramp up again, and it'll start to release on its own. And that's a symbolic or a good metaphor of these types of experiences, of something amplifying and then releasing on its own. And that's different than adjusting, all right? Adjusting something, minimize, like reducing the sensation in that way, right? It's a different, like, neurological experience. If you get a chance to go do a breathwork experience before the journey, or sitter school, it's a great thing. So, and other practices. So when you're ready, let's see, how would I say this? So you can add tracking and the 5 awareness practice to your body scan. So again, so I can break it down. Like, I'm going to do the body scan and focus on this aspect of it. I'm going to be gentle with the naming of the experience. I'm going to try not to be too much in my head. And then at the end of the tracking exercise, or at the end of the body scan exercise, you can do tracking. So instead of just resting in that space, you start being real focused. Okay, I've done the whole exercise. I've relaxed, like, the significant tightness in my body, right? I can become aware of more subtle sensations. What do I notice? And rest your awareness on that. Take a breath with it. and repeat. The resources that I gave you, the link to the body scan. So there's the one with the 25 minutes and then the 35 minutes of gentle oming, right? So that's the one with the extra music. Instead, what you could do is take the 25-minute one without the extra music and tack that onto a playlist. Whatever music you want. Like we'll talk more about music another time, but like if you have your favorite meditation music or drumming or weird music, journey music, whatever is there for you. Music can help create tracking experience, right? So do the body scan. You can do the shorter 15-minute version of the body scan and then do just some random great music that you love and see how it affects your inner experience. The next assignment is a creative art assignment, either through writing or art. If you could shrink up to little bitty and you had a ship, which would be a symbol of your light body, right? Your health and vitality, but your resilience and endurance. You had a ship that you could travel in. What would your ship look like? And it can look like a fantasy ship. It could look like a sailing ship, like a spaceship. Mine likes to morph as I grow and explore new things. It could have different capacities. Get to know your ship. And maybe I'll add a ship meditation exercise in our fourth class. I'm going to send you the feeling wheel and the feeling vocabulary, so start to know language around emotions. I'm going to send you intuition. I really want you to check out the intuition worksheet. It's really short, but it's one of the most important. Just this little sheet has been one of the most important tools that I've found to assess inner states and inner experiences. Learning how to develop intuition is a really wonderful thing. And then if you'd like, get on the forum and ask questions and share reflections. Our next class is going to be a fun one. More specifically, trauma resolution, shadow work, and aspects of self. So instead of just dross as a substance, we're starting to step into like really complex aspects of self. And symbols that have a presence and intelligence associated with them, right? So I think that's it for today. And I'm going to go ahead and X this out so you see me a little better. And I'm going to go ahead and close this up in a few minutes and get this uploaded. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And I'm right here. And I will send you another one of these videos in a couple of weeks. So in the meantime, practice the body scan every day if you can. Do it at night before you go to bed, even if it's just 5 minutes. Practice it on the floor in your meditation space. Smoke a little bit if you'd like, if that's legal where you are, and see how that impacts your experience, and have fun with it. Please feel free to share observations of your journey and of your experience in the forum. So, all right, many blessings, and I'll see you on the other side of the California trip, and then I'll see you May, and then we'll do some good work together. All right, take care.